We were talking about the woke stuff, and I was thinking about this earlier. I think the reason that we're seeing the success in the boycotts, it's not just because, and I think it's mostly not because people had some epiphany and they woke up and said, hey, wokeness is bad. I think what's happening is young people are more likely to be slightly more conservative, and you're seeing people in our generation and younger now becoming dominant forces in the market as we're entering our mid to late 30s into our 40s. And we are buying things as we would normally do. So in fact, I don't know how much of this anti-woke phenomena is actually related to a red pilling as it is related to young people who despise wokeness now having more money. And then when Target has been doing the Pride stuff for a decade, nobody cared.
Yeah.
And it is a combination of now they're doing the kids stuff. They may have done it for a long time, but now people are concerned about the kids stuff. But now I think you're looking at, I talked about how Republicans were having more kids in, it was like 3 to 4. For every 3 kids liberals were having, there were 4 kids conservatives were having. Then we see that was in 2000. Then it was reflected in Pew Research showing that Gen Z is slightly more conservative. Makes total sense then. When it comes to spending patterns, you will see the exact same thing. So whereas Target, for the boomers, the Gen Xers, and the younger millennials 10 years ago, had no problem putting up Pride merchandise, the younger generation now coming in, and our generation now getting more and more money, we're rejecting it all. Yeah. And it's hitting their bottom line really hard.
I mean, I'm thrilled that it seems to have met a tipping point where like they can no longer just to continue to shove this garbage down our throats, and it's not a moment too soon. I'm just curious to see like how bottomless is the ESG well? How many resources can the BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, central banking cabal, align to support these institutions that have ultimately been doing what Larry Fink demanded of them? Larry Fink for years has been demanding that every single business that he's going to give $1 to implement this type of nonsense. So if they turn around and then abandon them, well, then all of the other corporations that are witnessing that have to say to themselves, oh, it doesn't matter if we play by the rules. If the consumer turns against us, ultimately they're the power broker here.
I was saying this, I think it was when I was talking to Vivek Ramaswamy, that the Bud Light thing happened because it's a millennial woman who gets this high role in marketing and then says, we go woke. But I think what I missed at that period when I was saying, yeah, the wokeness is not like, it's not that people who work in these companies are becoming woke. It's that woke people are now getting jobs in these companies. What I didn't catch was the consumers don't care or want this stuff. And so the infiltrators will come into the institutions, implement these policies. It'll work for a little bit. And then once the other side of the coin, the consumer comes in, they reject all of those things, and those institutions begin to fail.
I sure hope, man. I think that's the only way forward, is that Anheuser-Busch, not just Bud Light in terms of a brand, but Anheuser-Busch has to be devastated by this decision.
I mean,
especially since it's an institutional American company. It's been around forever, right? To see that fall apart because of these decisions made by someone at that level who was hired is extremely symbolic.
But understand this. We have seen Bud Light sales drop precipitously over the past 2 months. And it's looking like it's bottoming out. Mm-hmm. It's not. When the boycott first started, we're talking April 1st, Dylan Mulvaney does this video. Then you get sales dropping by single digits, double digits, and now nearly 30%. It's Memorial Day weekend. It's May. It's summer. So what's actually happening is there is a spike in Bud Light sales. Bud Light sales are actually going way up. That happens every summer.
Oh, right.
Spring into summer, people are buying more and more beer, grilling, hanging out outside. If we're seeing it still going down from last week to this week, only a couple points, if this was a normal year with no boycott, you would actually see an inverse picture of the sales leveling and then spiking in May. So my point here is, if it were not for the boycott, their sales would be up double digits. The fact their sales are only down a couple percent means, in spite of the summer months hitting and people and Memorial Day weekend, people celebrating holidays, their sales are still dropping. After this summer, I think it's going to drop a lot harder.
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. And this video has gone viral. It actually is a couple months old. I remember I tweeted it out, but it has been going viral again over the past 48 hours where Larry Fink, who's the CEO of BlackRock, $9 trillion under management, insane, is being interviewed. And he's talking about forcing behaviors, quote unquote, forcing behaviors. We have to force behaviors. And what he's not just implying, but saying overtly is that we will force these companies to do away with their fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders because we are bigger than the shareholder. We are ultimately the only thing that matters. It's not your consumers. It's not your mom and pop shareholders. It's not your employees. It's none of that matters. It's the big financial arms at the end of the day that get to dictate your behavior. And that is their worldview as to why this has been implemented, is that they were going to force behaviors like implementing diversity, equity, inclusion in brands that were extraordinarily masculine historically, which makes no effing sense whatsoever. But they started with Gillette, and then they just worked down the line, and finally, the American people have had enough. Thank God.
Well, look at Disney and what's going on with Disney, or even Marvel. This happened to Marvel like 8 years, longer than this has been going on here when we talk about woke women who end up in middle management positions and then start pushing ideas onto these companies that don't jive with your audience.
Right.
Yes, exactly. But Marvel, a brand that has a strong market in the average middle-aged American male, and they'll always be able to sell comics to them, but they're always looking for the mythical, the mythical new demographic that's going to somehow magically expand their consumer base, right? And it never works out that way because that's not how that type of business works, at least not in a creative sense. You can't start selling these things in a sense that it doesn't feel authentic, and it doesn't come across authentic because it doesn't match with the rest of the brand. Right. And remember, they're owned by Disney, so it doesn't even matter. So it's a funny microcosm because Marvel Comics is a rounding error to a company like Disney. The movies obviously are enormous, but the comics are a rounding error. True. Because it's such a smaller brand nowadays because so many less people are actually buying physical comics. And for them, now you look at the movies and like what Tim was saying about things bottoming out, I think The Little Mermaid, for instance, is made like 120 million in its opening weekend. But when you count for inflation, it's far below what it would have been just a couple of years ago, obviously before inflation skyrocketed back upwards. Mm-hmm. And that's another example of what it is. You get people in middle management companies, middle management positions at these companies, and they start pushing these agendas, whether it is DEI or in a lot of cases for this stuff, they're just telling them look, this is good marketing. This is where we want to go. BlackRock and all of these companies obviously agreed. They think, why wouldn't this be a good idea? Well, it doesn't jive with the brand, just like it doesn't with Bud Light, just like it doesn't with Gillette. And we see evidence over and over again that it's not working, but they keep doing it. And that's the hard part for me.
So what happens? Do they find the millennial who is not someone who grew up with wokeism and is in middle management and swap them in, or do we have to wait for the newest generation of middle management to rise up and graduate and finally get to these
both.
corporations?
You have actual comics like Eric July's ISOM, which is trying to create a competitor to Marvel. I have no idea if he'll be successful. Obviously, I'm rooting for him because he comes from my ideological camp. But there's going to be a lot of competition that tries to replace some of these Goliaths. But the problem is that you can't get financing at the highest levels to compete with these guys. Because if you want that financing, you have to do the same crazy stuff to compete. So you have to go DEI, you have to go ESG. So the only way you can compete is to be someone like Tim Pool or Ben Shapiro, Daily Wire. You have to get capital from other people that are already successful, telling the truth and bucking the woke trend. And you guys have to combine your resources and then use your platforms to compete. It's very challenging. That's why people get it totally wrong when they go, well, if this was so bad, then all of these companies would go bankrupt. No, they exist still because there's no competition. Because ESG is a tool to create and harness and inculcate the oligopoly that exists. That's why you don't see competition. And this is why ultimately there ought to be anti-competitive investigations into this entire operation, because as far as I'm concerned, it's got to be criminal on multiple levels.
But there probably never will be.
Because they own all the politicians. Yeah. Yes.
And then aliens will be announced again and we'll just forget all about it.
I'm telling you, if we hold out long enough, they'll tell us some real secrets.
I really want to know where Hoffa's buried. Can we just hold out for that?
Yeah. Keep putting pressure on the Biden situation to find out about Hoffa.
They have to confirm every single conspiracy theory before they admit that Joe Biden's crooked.
Yeah.
It's like, oh man, do we have any conspiracy theories left? We've already admitted to everything.
So the frogs are being turned gay.
and there are eight subfloors under the Denver airport. All of the good stuff.
That's where Hoffa is, under the Denver airport. That's what I heard.
Yeah, no,
Denver airport one really gets me because they're
Weren't we
like
just talking about this the other day?
I've been thinking about it for a little while. It got introduced to me and now I can't stop. I was talking about it on PCC on Friday.
Yeah.
I love that they were like, we have a working airport, but we'll build this really expensive one with a baggage shipping situation that actually we don't need. Like, the city of Denver should be irate if they just wasted all this money on an airport, which everyone I know who lives in Denver is like, we hate driving through the Denver airport to pick people up. Like,
and how does a story like that not
this?
turn into a conspiracy theory? We built this massive place underneath the airport and then decided, no,
we're just not going to use it. Like, no one is mad about that. Interesting.
I like it.
I like the paintings.
Oh, yeah?
You've seen the paintings at Denver Airport?
Oh, yeah.
So creepy.
Yeah, they are.
And then the horse that killed its artist, and then they put it up
that's
anyway.
Crazy. Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.